McCarthy Insurance Group, serving the community for over 70 years. For home, farm, motor, life, health and business insurance, log on to mig.ie or free phone 1800 50 11 11. Probably your best call in 2024. Charles McCarthy Insurance is trading as McCarthy Insurance Group, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
Now, real people, real opinions. Nighttime Talk with Niall Boylan.
Ireland's classic hits radio.
Michael Walsh is an American author, friend of the show, journalist and political commentator, renowned for his incisive analysis of American politics and culture, and a former associate of the editor of Times Magazine. And he's written lots of great bestsellers, by the way, The Devil's Pleasure Palace, Fairy Angel, and of course, his more recent book, which is called Against the Corporate Media. And he joins me on the line. Michael, good afternoon or good evening to you. How are you?
I'm great, Niall. Thanks for having me on.
We wanted to talk about, firstly, the vice presidential debate last night. Of course, it was a very interesting debate. For a lot of people in America, this was considered to be the most important vice presidential debate because they're never considered that important, I suppose, normally. So you had Democrat Tim Walz, governor of Minnesota, and Republican J.D. Vance, a freshman senator from Ohio. In your eyes, or what are the Americans saying? Who won the debate?
Well, I only know this by hearsay because I'm talking to you from Budapest, Hungary tonight.
Oh, okay.
And so I wasn't able to watch the debate, but I've certainly seen all the clips by now, and I've read all the commentary. I thought Vance would do very, very, very well going in, and that seems to be the consensus that he by a large margin outpointed Walsh. Most Americans don't know Walsh, and he's the more, in a way, weird, to use his word that he applied to J.D. Vance. He's the weirder of the two of them. He's a very strange guy. He's a Midwestern radical leftist. And for our audiences who don't understand American politics, the upper Midwest, Minnesota, Wisconsin, parts of Illinois, have this tradition of being practically socialist communists. So it's a very Scandinavian German part of the country, and it's taken this leftism to an absurd degree. In fact, there is no real Democrat Party in Minnesota. It's called the Farmer Labor Party. It's a throwback to the 1920s and 30s. Anyway, Walsh is deeply, deeply weird, and people saw when he said, I'm friends with school shooters. I mean, it was over at that point. over.
Yeah, I did see that clip, by the way, yeah.
This guy is crazy. And you look at his eyes and you see he's crazy. And his wife said while they were burning Minneapolis during the St. George of Floyd riots, she said she left the windows open so she could smell the burning rubber. This is how much these people hate America now. And we're finally beginning to penetrate through the veil of media obfuscation to get at the real nature of the political opponents in the United States and elsewhere.
For many people who don't know, of course, Donald Trump affectionately refers to Tim Walz as Tampon Tim. And the reason being, of course, that his claim to fame was that he put tampon machines in men's toilets, obviously in relation to transgenderism. Right. So that was his claim to fame. I mean, on the other hand, you got, people like, I suppose, when we look at the Republican candidate and vice president, we're basically saying somebody who has very conservative views. He was criticised over his views, about, women staying at home and all this kind of stuff, and his very traditional views. He is Republican, he is conservative, but maybe too conservative for some people.
Well, he was a hero up until 5 minutes ago. I mean, the point is, the man is up by his bootstraps kid from Appalachia, although he was born in Ohio, I believe. I don't know how to put this in Irish terms, but bog trotter comes to mind. I mean, these are people, culchies. These are people that are regarded as practically primitive savages. And this kid got to Ohio. He made something of himself. He joined the Marine Corps. So that's a good thing in my view, being a Marine kid myself. And then he wrote a best-selling book called Hillbilly Elegy, which they loved. And then it was made into a very successful movie, which they loved. And then Trump picked him. Now they hate him. They hate him. He's weird. He's crazy. He's weird. They hate him. So you see the media in America turns on a dime. Let's not forget that they said that Joe Biden was sharp as a tack right up to the day the coup took him out. And then he was an old, senile, doddering man who couldn't do the job anymore and had to be replaced. In an American history first, they deposed their own president. This tells you how ruthless these people are and what we're up against.
I mean, Tim Walz was constantly praising, obviously, as you would expect him to, Kamala Harris' leadership and how, I mean, I don't know how you would rate her performance as a vice president, especially in comparison to past vice presidents. Donald Trump has described her as being mentally unwell from birth, I think was the words he used, which he's been criticised for saying. He said that Joe Biden became unwell, but Kamala was born like that. I mean, can you honestly see her will she even have the power to do a lot of damage if she became the president of the United States?
Well, yes, because there is no Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris is an entirely a creation of this semi-shadowy group of people starring Barack Obama, so it's not that shadowy, who have pushed her career. She was, as we all now know, Willie Brown's mistress. Willie Brown, for Irish audiences who don't know, was a very important player in the California state legislature when I lived in San Francisco. Notorious man about town and ladies' man, sharp dresser, a very appealing guy. She was his mistress for quite a while, rather openly. There's photographs of it everywhere. So she was then promoted up through the Democrat machine that runs the state of California. And Biden picked her because she was the least plausible person to succeed him. And up until the day she did, she was rated by all surveys as the worst vice president ever.
But she kind of disappeared. I mean, we spoke about this going back about a year ago, and we talked about the fact that, where was Kamala? It was like, where is Wally? She kind of had vanished, hadn't she? It was like they were hiding her.
Well, she has no skill. She has no skills, no marketable skills. She really has never done anything in her life. So she was the perfect choice to succeed a president who is effectively a rutabaga and can barely communicate and is at this point just gone. She will be a very unthreatening person to Barack Obama and Valerie Jarrett and the people that are really running things. Another thing that Irish listeners need to keep in mind, there's a tradition in America that when your term in office is up, you leave Washington. It's almost kind of Roman in a way. You go into exile. You're out of the Capitol forever. Well, guess who didn't leave Washington? Barack Obama, who lives somehow 3 or 4 miles in the fanciest, most expensive neighborhood in Washington, D.C., called Kalorama. So that's the real power behind the throne. She'll be a puppet, and they will keep pushing these extreme measures. And you're getting a taste of this American leftism in Ireland right now, too. They'll just keep pushing until they blow the thing up. This story ends badly any way you reel it out. And I would also ask one more thing. Stop fixating on Donald Trump. Donald Trump will either be elected or not. Either way, he's done as a political force in America. And what you ought to be looking at now is Vance and Ron DeSantis, and then look at the Democrats who have defected to the Republicans, Tulsi Gabbard, Bobby Jr., the sainted Kennedy family. The Republicans have positioned themselves very well for the next election, and the Democrats are prepared to write off Kamala and Biden, Robinette, as I like to call him, and just take the hit for the team and come back in 4 years.
What is the big election? I mean, look, everybody knows immigration is a big problem worldwide, not just in the United States. But apart from immigration, what are the other big things that are going to get the voters going? I mean, Vance last night criticised the administration's handling of the economy, particularly inflation. How do you think, economic issues are going to weigh in on this election?
Oh, they're going to be huge. I mean, every single person in the States knows that the day Trump left office, gasoline, petrol cost $1.80, and now it's up to $4, $5, $6, $7, depending on what part of the country you live in. Everything doubled in price almost overnight. I mean, literally everything. The cost of lumber, the cost of housing, everything collapsed immediately. We stopped drilling. Biden's very first act as president was to kill a transcontinental pipeline that would have given not only jobs, but kept America energy independent. They've been a complete disaster from the start, but they're propped up by two things. Abortion is one, and they played that very cannily, even though they lost in the Supreme Court. They've made that an issue. And also just sheer leftist nonsense. So Tampon Tim is the name he got for very good reason. He's insane. There are tampon machines in the boys' bathrooms. And I think most Americans have decided this has got to stop. We are ending it now. We'll see. I may be wrong. I've been wrong before.
Well, I mean, look, you've only got about 30 days to go. The elections, of course, for Irish people who are not familiar with American elections, they've already started. The voting has already started. We have our voting on one day, of course, but in America, it's a continuous process over a period of about 45, 50 days. So, I mean, at this stage now obviously nobody's got no idea how the votes are going, but there has been a lot of criticism where Gavin Newsom, or Nuisance, has brought in legislation that nobody is allowed to ask anybody for identification going into a polling station. That, to Irish people, and most countries in the world, that seems rather weird, that you would not have to produce identification if you're voting.
No, it is insane. And you have to produce identification in America to blow your nose in public, and you don't have to have it to vote.
Well, I mean, if I wanted to go into an American gas station and buy a beer, I'd have to produce identification. So, I mean, you know.
You have to get on a plane, to do anything. But the Democrats love to cheat. And they want voting as open as possible. They are importing millions of people into the country through an open southern border, through these new program, the Biden administration, of literally flying them in from the third world and giving them temporary protected status. I mean, Ireland's problems are minuscule compared to America, but they're the same problem, where you have a government acting against the wishes and the best interests of its own people as they decide to change the electorate irrevocably. That's a real problem. It's a problem all over the world. But you see, now I was in Germany recently, last week, and the Alternative for Deutschland has made huge progress. The French election showed that, they were able to hold on to power, but only by getting all the competing candidates out of the race, and so that Le Pen couldn't get a majority in the legislature. The Swedes, Europe has started asking for identification now. Giorgia Meloni has said Italy has had enough of this. Ireland's on the wrong side of immigration, but as usual, we'll be the last people to figure that out, unfortunately.
Well, the problem with Ireland is, of course, we have political parties who all are kind of singing from the same hymn sheet, so there's not real democracy going on here anymore. I don't believe there is, anyway. But getting back to this debate, how important is this debate for those kind of swing voters? I mean, does the vice presidential debate get a few votes in?
Yeah, because, as I said, Trump's a lame duck no matter what happens. So if Vance is the vice president, he's going to be the favorite to run for president 4 years from now. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the reasons this was important. And it's also important that to see what she had decided on her own. She could have picked Josh Shapiro, who is a well-regarded governor of Pennsylvania, which, by the way, is the only state that matters. The other 49 don't even have to vote. This election is entirely going to be decided by the voters in Pennsylvania. And Pennsylvania has two big cities and a bunch of farmers. So it'll be a vote of the urban class against the suburban, not the suburban.
Explain to me briefly how that works, because that confuses us, particularly over here when we have a very different voting system. And I've heard this before. Whoever wins Pennsylvania wins the election. So why is Pennsylvania so important in the American elections?
Well, it's just emerged that way. If you looked at the two Trump elections, you saw there were 5 or 6 so-called swing states. Remember, each state conducts its own election by its own rules. It's one of the reasons we have this idiotic election months now or more. There should be one vote, one man, one day, the end. But Democrats have changed that because they need to be able to steal elections by knowing how many votes they have to make up on actual election day. They've done this in Connecticut, my state where I live, on several occasions, and they do it routinely. But it's now down to 5 or 6 states. Arizona is one, Pennsylvania is one, Wisconsin is another one, North Carolina. Florida used to be, but DeSantis has turned Florida completely conservative. They love him in Florida, and people are flocking to Florida to do it. So it's really come down to Pennsylvania. It's a big state population-wise. It's pretty much evenly split down the middle. So the question is, will the ballot counting, which, by the way, stopped in Philadelphia. That was the sign something was up on the last Trump election, because they shut it. They kicked everybody out. They shut the door. Trump was ahead by 1 million votes. When I went to sleep at 2 o'clock in the morning, I woke up at 6 because I was writing about it for the New York Post, and Trump was behind. Where did 1 million votes come from between 2 and 6 a.m.? That just got people thinking. And that's why Pennsylvania, again, is just kind of fallen into the position of being the deciding state, because you have to get 270 electoral votes. And the person who gets Pennsylvania, that will put him over the top, assuming that all the other states act as they generally do. And I think there's a good chance that's what's going to come. So it'll be a close election in the Electoral College, which is all that matters, by the way. Remember, if Kamala Harris gets 40 million votes in California and Trump gets 1, she gets the same number of electoral votes, 57 or whatever. So 39 million of her votes are wasted. That's
I mean, you've kind of. So I know you well, Michael. We've chatted off air and stuff like that. But over the last few years, you've kind of flipped back and forward when it comes to Donald Trump. I don't know whether the assassination attempts have done him any favors. They probably have. It certainly got him a bit of publicity, although nobody wants to see that happening, of course. But in saying that, you kind of went from being a Trump fan or a Trump supporter to being very anti-Trump at one stage, and then you kind of went back a little bit to Trump again. I'm not saying you're a huge Trump supporter at the moment, but you're obviously thinking he's the better of the Hobson's choice.
Well, I'll vote for Trump if that's the question. Of course I will. But I think even with people you like and respect, you're allowed to disagree. And that's one of the things that shows some movement in Trump himself, is that he picked Vance, who was just as critical as I was or Ron DeSantis was or anybody, because I think he's finally realized you want smart people who are going to disagree with you in your cabinet. You don't want a cabinet of yes men. Otherwise you get the racket which currently controls Ireland. There's not a dime's worth of difference between Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil, and together they're just going to keep that country in its current state, which ain't great. But passing that, Trump, I think, has matured enough now to take on someone like Vance as his vice president, who criticized him extremely harshly, and he admits that. So it's I think Trump has caused this bizarre obsession in Europe where everyone thinks he's the devil because of the media mostly, when in fact he's a guy who's made money, lost money. There's a lot of things about him that aren't appealing, but there are a lot of things about him that are appealing, which is why he was elected in 2016 and why I think he has a very good chance to be elected again. He just has to play. He has to play it smart.
Well, his latest inductee is Elon Musk, of course. He said he's going to hire Elon Musk to sort out the American economy.
Well, who wouldn't? I mean, seriously, the guy is going to be the first individual trillionaire in the history of the planet Earth. He will be the single richest human being who's ever lived. And he hasn't done it through handouts. He's invented things. He's sending a rocket ship to go rescue astronauts that our NASA can't bring home. The country is so poor now. It can't make anything. It can't do anything. It is literally like in the late Roman Empire, they forgot how to make concrete. And we still don't know how the real ancient Romans made concrete because they forgot, because they didn't keep their skills sharp and they lost their industrial base and they collapsed. And that's where America is heading. And a lot of people see that and they say, we've got to stop this. Trump's not perfect, but he's the only guy that can stop this slide.
Do you believe, by the way, when he says, obviously he spoke to the president of Ukraine the other day, mind you, Zelensky wasn't too pleased when he said at the press conference that Zelensky was his friend and so was Putin, and Zelensky was kind of nodding him as if to say, I'm a better friend. But Zelensky must be concerned, of course, that if President Trump gets in, that he's not going to get any more funding for the war, and that obviously Donald Trump believes he can stop that war overnight by getting them around a table. Zelensky doesn't want to go around a table, he just wants to win the war. So do you believe that Donald Trump could get Iran, for example, to join the Abraham Accord, could stop the war in the Middle East, or certainly bring some sort of peace to the Middle East? And do you think he could stop the war in Ukraine? Do you think he can genuinely, he said they're the first 2 phone calls he's going to make. Do you think he could do that?
I don't know, but I think the gravy train is over for Zelensky. I think the Ukrainians have no chance of winning that war whatsoever. And all this money that has been poured into that country and the courtesies, if I may use that word, that have been extended by some countries that I know and love and actually have houses in, the courtesies that have been extended are absurd and are beggaring the people who have been forced into supporting this dictator. He's canceled elections. He's marginalized the Orthodox Christian Church. He's not a good guy. And the day Zelensky goes down will be a very happy day for the rest of the world. That will take us out of a World War III confrontation with Russia. As far as the Middle East is concerned, the Israelis, who are led by actually a great man, Benjamin Netanyahu, have decided the hell with what the United States thinks. We don't care anymore. We are tired of being murdered in our beds, and we're going to end this. It's a lot of.
What do you say to people who disagree with your analysis of that, and they believe that Israel are the agitator in this situation?
Well, I think that's just plain stupid, and it's unhistorical, and it's not even remotely close to the truth. It's not even remotely. You can.
Well, there are two sides of each story, aren't there? Obviously,
there are two sides. Yes.
Yeah, and there's innocent people being slaughtered on both sides.
Oh, I ain't saying it's good. Now, I've written 2 major books of military history, and I'm about to start on a 3rd one, all about war, starting with the ancient Greeks, and going in my new book coming out in January, going right up to Patton at the Battle of the Bulge. War is an ugly business, but what's uglier is expecting it to end in negotiation. It cannot end in negotiation. It must end with victory for one side or the other. And the Israelis have finally figured that out. The Jews are no longer going to be the victims here. They're going to take the fight to their enemies. And we admire that as Americans, because that's what we do, too. We used to. Now, we haven't won a war since 1945.
Well, I know Simon Harris had said today when he meets Joe Biden that he will be, or was it Micheál Martin, I can't remember, talking to him that the Irish people don't support his views in relation to Israel. Anyway, look, different countries have different views. Getting back to the American elections, of course, all will be decided on the 5th of November. Yeah. Do you think Donald Trump will take defeat in glory, or do you think he'll accept the defeat? Unlike the last time, he didn't really accept defeat the last time. This time, if he's defeated, do you think he'll accept it, or do you think he'll go down in a flame of glory as well?
Well, the question is, will the Democrats accept defeat? I think that's much more of a question. They have now said openly, people like Jamie Raskin, who's a red diaper baby from Maryland, have said they won't vote to certify it if he wins. The election is going to be a nightmare unparalleled in human history, certainly in American history. Both sides will claim victory. It will be undetermined. The New York Times, which is an evil propaganda sheet for the left, has already started warning people, oh, you're not going to know who won the next day. You may not know for days. You may not know for weeks. And this is not the America I grew up in, and it's not the America most Americans want. Look, Trump is out one way or the other. I don't think he's going to put up a big fuss, but it has to be shown the election was fair. It has to be shown they didn't close and bring in harvested ballots from the cemeteries and suddenly dump them in a box.
Now, real people, real opinions. Nighttime Talk with Niall Boylan.
Ireland's classic hits radio.